Hello, welcome to Muriel's Murders. I'm Muriel, and I love true crime.
I'm Nick, and I'm not a fan.
Thank you for joining us. Each week, I force Nick to listen to me tell him a story of a true crime. This week, we're going to talk about the documentary going viral in South Africa at the moment, Devilsdorp, a Showmax original directed by Devid Enright. A South African listener brought this doc to our attention, and I was able to get a copy.
Very sneaky of you, Muriel.
I know, and I have to say this. It's just absolutely fantastic. The story is totally insane. We've got cults, witchcraft, serial killers, goths, everything.
Goths?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, thank you to Linda for cluing us into this case. And if you're a sensitive listener, heads up, because this story is actually a doozy.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's really hard to even be able to see this documentary in the States, right?
Yeah, and it's so good.
Yeah.
I just the story is so wild.
Yeah.
I've done some reading on this story, just in different news articles and stuff. But the documentary really just does a beautiful job of giving you all of this context, and it has tons of original footage. So you have home movies and footage from the trial and all of these different things that it can't capture, what you kind of read in a casual news article.
Well, you're giving credit to the documentary, and I want to give credit to you for getting your hands on it.
And credit to Linda. Thank you so much. And also I want to say to Linda, I could not... I feel dumb now that she explained it to me.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I just couldn't figure out how to translate rand, which is the South African currency in the area, to dollars. I just could. Anyway, it's not critical, but it's kind of important to get a general picture of why some of this money stuff is important. And I messaged her on Instagram, and she was really patient and nice, and she explained the whole thing to me.
We love our listeners, man.
They're the best.
And this is episode 23, and as a new podcast, we just want to thank you so much for listening. It really, really means a lot that you're here. Lots of love goes out to Ariel, the newest member of the Muriel's Murders Patreon family. We have a lot of goals with our Patreon, and because of Ariel, we are almost halfway to the first of those goals. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Remember, this is a true story involving murder, violence, drugs, adult themes, etc. So if any listeners are like Nick and they don't want to hear about those kind of things, please consider listening to a different podcast.
Plus, we'll probably do a little cursing and joking. So if you're sensitive to that, please keep that in mind and maybe turn us off.
Okay, Nikki. Are you ready to hear this story?
No!
Okay, let's get started.
Muriel, I can tell you were just salivating with this story.
I'm going to do a little, just a little reveal behind the curtain. Before Nick hit record, he said, "Is the word salivating?"
Get to the story, Muriel. Come on, people want the goods.
Okay.
Don't bust on me.
So I'm going to do a little introduction to get you familiarized with the place, right? Okay,
Great.
So this story takes place in Krugersdorp, South Africa. So this is a town in the West Rand, which is an area on the western side of Johannesburg in the Gauteng province. So this is the broad picture.
Okay.
We'll start with the Gauteng province. So according to South Africa Info.com, the Gauteng province is the most populous and wealthy province in South Africa. And its most lucrative sector is finance. So that's how the economy kind of generates most of its money.
Okay.
So within the Gauteng province, that's the larger area, is the West Rand municipality. Okay. So in the West Rand municipality, mining accounts for 30% of the economy.
Mining?
Yeah. So generally speaking, in the province, it's kind of this wealthy finance sort of focused province. Now, as you get smaller into the West Rand, mining becomes more of a component of the economy.
What
right?
do they mine?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Nice.
Okay. Lots of stuff.
Okay.
So in Krugersdorp, which is a city in the West Rand municipality, that's a mining town. It's a mining town that was founded in 1887 during the gold rush. The population's about 140,000. So it's a mid-sized city. It's not massive,
right,
but it's definitely substantial. And there are still mines operating today for things like gold, lime, iron, asbestos, so lots of different minerals, but gold was the main thing. I think from what I've read, the mines are producing less these days, so that aspect of the economy is in a downturn, but that's generally speaking the history of how that economy was shaped.
Damn, I didn't know they mined for asbestos. That was just something we hid from in our schools here in Seattle, Seattle public schools.
That's where it comes from. It's like, it's a mineral. So anywhere, I think we mine it here too.
That's so crazy to me. I didn't even know,
know that.
I thought it was like a waste byproduct that they shoved in our walls and then gave us education surrounded by.
No, it's like it's also like it's an insulator, right? It's supposed to kind of keep things from lighting on fire.
Cool. I didn't know really.
Yeah,
okay.
Also, pretty cancerous. All right. So despite the area being comparatively wealthy, according to the documentary, basically there's still pretty big wealth disparities that still exist in Krugersdorp, with the majority being very poor. So to give a picture, like according to the West Rand District Municipality website, in 2019, the average annual income in West Rand was about 57,000 Rand, which is around $4,000 in the US. So that's actually almost double the average South African annual income. So generally speaking, they're doing well, right, in the West Rand.
Yeah.
But over 30% of the population earns less than 20,000 Rand per year. So that's $1,400 per year. So it's like there is a really healthy average salary.
Yeah.
But a large portion of people make considerably less.
Way less.
Right. So the average is factoring in like a much higher accounts.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about this series of murders that happened called the appointment murders, which happened basically to mostly financial advisors or people working in the finance sector. And so just for a point of reference, people working in the finance sector, according to Glassdoor.com, make about 150,000 Rand a year. So about 5 times the national average of income.
Right.
So there's definitely like very rich and very poor. And I think particularly in this province, because finance is such a big part of the economy.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Awesome.
But you're saying it's the financiers that were getting killed in this story?
For part of it. So that's the reason why we want to kind of say, like, this is kind of what you're dealing with.
All
and
right.
actually, a large part of this story takes place about a 4-minute drive from this really famous shanty town or like squatter camp called Coronation Park. There's a park called Coronation Park, and then within that there's like a big squatter camp. Got it. So the story takes place about 4 minutes from there, across the street from the Krugersdorp private hospital. Okay. So on May 10th, 2016, police discover an abandoned car outside of a primary school in Krugersdorp. And in the trunk, they find the body of a man stuffed into garbage bags. And the victim had been strangled. So he was a financial advisor named Anthony Schofield, who had disappeared after an appointment earlier in the night at 6 p.m. And there was a large sum of money withdrawn from his bank account, about 16,000 Rand. So according to the West Rand District Municipality statistics, that's about a quarter of what the average person in the area would make in a year.
Okay.
Right? So a pretty significant amount of money.
Sure.
So just about 2 weeks later, on May 26, 2016, another financial advisor disappeared after a 6 p.m. appointment. So when Kevin McAlpine didn't return from a 6 p.m. appointment, his pregnant wife, Ceclia McAlpine, called this organization called Tracker, which from what I can tell is like a kind of a stolen vehicle hotline, because she assumed he'd been hijacked. From what I understand, this isn't specifically addressed in the documentary, but there's a lot of crime in the area, and there are certain areas in Krugersdorp that they're super high crime. Yeah. And so it looks like as an American, it's kind of wild that the police response is that quick. So I think like a lot of these appointments, they were happening at 6 p.m. And when the people didn't come home 4 hours later, they were already out looking for them.
Right. In America, it's like, we need like 4 days.
Right. Like they, like out here, they'll make you wait a really long time. I was like, dang, you guys are I kept double checking the times because I was like, that night?
Yeah. Right.
Which is awesome. Well, so there's I don't know. It is what it is. But I think that if you listen to a lot of American-based true crime, there's always like a lot of the time there's frustration that like you have to have this holding period before you have to look for somebody.
Right.
So in addition to the police response time seeming to be pretty quick, it sounds like people use this organization or this business tracker.
Yeah.
So like if you feel like something's off and you're worried, you pay for this service and you plug the license plate in, and then somebody will like go out and find that car.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what she did. So they found Kevin McAlpine's car about 15 minutes after his wife called Tracker.
Oh, so they're good at their job.
Yeah, fast, right?
Yeah.
And they find it in this sort of bad part of town, and they open the trunk. The police come, and his body's also in the trunk of the car, wrapped in garbage bags. He had been strangled as well, and there was a significant amount of money missing from his bank account.
Yeah.
So at this point, they're like,
someone's up to something.
Right.
Yeah, clearly.
Clearly, like, we're dealing with some kind of a serial killer.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, people are seeing this pattern.
Sure.
And because the murders were happening during business appointments, people started canceling appointments everywhere. And financial advisors or people who worked in finance were like, you know, freaked out.
Yeah.
Because Krugersdorp is small enough, and I think this kind of financial community is small enough that some of the victims either knew each other or knew of each other.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, one reporter describes like arriving on the scene of Kevin McAlpine's murder and then like talks to someone who's there, and then she realizes, oh, that's Kevin, my mom's good friend.
Right.
You know, so a lot of people kind of know each other.
Yeah.
And then 4 days later, on May 30th, 2016, 53-year-old Hanley Leitgen was late coming home from an appointment. So she's a real estate agent. And at first, the family thought she was just late running errands. But then they get these alerts that someone's trying to pull large amounts of money out of their bank account.
Yeah.
So Francois Leitgen, Hanley's son, said, you know, everyone in the neighborhood had been worried about this serial killer. So when his mom didn't come home, he just thought for sure something terrible had happened.
Yeah.
So he gets in his car and he heads to where they had found Kevin McAlpine's body and just looks around to see if he can find his mom's car. And later that night, police find Hanley's car outside of the Krugersdorp private hospital. So police are there. Francois is there. There's a search party going on. And Francois walks up and he tries to measure the distance between the back wheels and the wheel well to see if there was weight in the trunk, because they hadn't figured out how to open the trunk yet. So he's just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And they start a prayer circle and people are kind of praying while the police are breaking into this car. They smash Hanley's window. They get into the trunk. The trunk is empty.
Uh-huh.
So after the trunk is empty, they figure they should be able to find her somewhere in the vicinity. So Francois and the search party cover the area around the hospital in the dark. And as they're walking around, they notice that there's CCTV cameras mounted outside. So they go inside to get somebody to show them the tapes. And as they're reviewing the tapes, Francois finds the footage he's looking for. He finds footage of his mom pulling up to the hospital, getting out of the car, and then a woman approaching with black hair and black clothes. And the women meet, they talk, and then they walk off camera. And that's when they lose any other footage of her.
Did it make sense that she was pulling up to the hospital?
No one addressed that.
Yeah.
It might have been a meeting point, but I think
There might be other things close to the hospital that would make sense that she's arriving to.
maybe, yeah.
Okay.
It's not like in the middle of nowhere, right?
Right.
But it is, as far as I could see, I think her car was right in front of the hospital.
Yeah.
So Francois goes outside and he wants to look in the direction of where his mom had disappeared with this mystery woman in black. And as he walks around the corner, he comes face to face with a group of people watching him from a block of apartments. The apartments are called the Kosana Flats, next door to the hospital. And Francois found it odd, but also like there's lots of police and maybe there's lots of like looky-loos or whatever is going on. But, you know, so he's kind of clocking that. But basically, it's getting late and police have decided they'd rather search with helicopters and they can't do that till morning. So they decide to shut down the search and kind of reopen it at daybreak. And around 11 p.m., everyone went home. In the morning, the sun goes up, the search begins. And as a group of school kids are walking through this wooded area that's known for illegal trash dumping.
Oh, no.
They find Hanley's body.
This is the third death, huh?
Right. And she had also been strangled. So the only difference is she wasn't found in her car.
Yeah. Man.
So the media dubbed these 3 murders as the appointment murders. And at first, police had no suspects, and the city imposed this 6 p.m. curfew for public safety. So they're keeping people indoors, but the killings seem to have stopped. They just don't have any leads.
Even like they could probably figure out who had the appointments with these people at 6 p.m. Like none of that was going anywhere.
I think people are starting to gather information, but there's no leads at first.
Okay.
Right? So police pull together the big guns. So you have a guy, Brigadier Main Victor. He took the lead on the case, and he was the head of the crime intelligence unit in Gauteng province. So, a high-ranking police official. And he was also the head of the war room, where heads of different policing departments in the area would get together to solve difficult cases.
Yeah.
And immediately, the war room convenes. They meet 7 days a week, every morning, to hash out how to find the serial killer. Now, Brigadier Victor also tapped this man called Captain Ben Boyson. And he's an investigating officer who would eventually crack the case. So Ben is awesome. He's famous in Gauteng province law enforcement for being this badass investigator.
Yeah.
He wears like when you get introduced to him, he has like a giant bowl of like little metal adornments that he uses when he gets ready. So he's got like gold clips that go onto the ends of his lapels and like all these rings and like pins and all these different things that he gets like dressed up with.
So in the documentary, you just see him like choosing what things he's going to put on today.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
He's got this excellent spiky gray mullet, and he's really into Chuck Norris. He's really like, if there's ever a movie about my life, Chuck Norris is going to play me. Like, he's super into it. And he's known for being a lone wolf, right?
Sure, of
he
course.
only works alone. He doesn't collaborate on any investigative teams. He's like, I do what I do. Right?
Yeah.
So police catch a break when they went through all the CCTV footage from the ATMs where stolen money had been withdrawn, and they find on the tape the same 2 young people making withdrawals at some point in the footage of all 3 places where the victims' cards were used to withdraw money. So these kids keep popping up, right?
Sure.
And someone at the station recognizes them as the Steyn children. So this is LaRue and Marcel Steyn. And they see that they're attempting to disguise themselves by wearing hoodies and beanies and stuff like that.
And the times they're showing up to the ATM sort of makes sense with the disappearance of the victims.
Exactly. It's like on the night of the disappearance, at the time that PIN number was used.
Sure.
Those kids just are
sometime after 6 p.m. Okay.
Right.
Right.
So they bring the Steyn kids in to interview and photograph them for facial comparison. So they have to kind of do this really cool thing where they photograph all angles of their face, and then they go through the footage and kind of match these different points. So Marcel, the girl, had just graduated from high school, and she had excellent grades and test scores. And LaRue, the boy, was around 20, and he just kind of worked around Krugersdorp doing odd jobs. Police dressed them up in beanies like they did on the CCTV footage and posed them. And then basically because they're teenagers and they had like a few pimples and piercings and different things like that, they were able to use all that to connect them to the footage.
Oh no, the acne came back.
I know. I was just like, I remember that age.
Oh
we were
no.
just like, damn it. That thing you thought no one would notice is like the thing that got you.
They're like, that
for murder.
That huge thing on your neck that you said was a mosquito bite. Wait a minute. Also, so they're brother sister.
Yeah, they're brother and sister. Right, They're 18 and 20. So the facial comparison was a match, and about 3 weeks into the investigation, police had their star suspects.
Can I bring something up real quick? Yeah. I feel like you could dress someone up with the beanies and the thing and put in the camera at a certain angle, and they're like, they really look like them. Like, what about fingerprints or the money also?
I don't think they had fingerprints. I think that the strongest connection they had with the CCTV footage, but you could pretty clearly see their faces. And there's specific things like an eyebrow ring with exactly the same stud. And they were doing things like taking the shape and the structure of the mouth and breaking it down into like 1,000 distinct points and then running it across the structure of her mouth. It wasn't just like, that guy looks like he has thing on his face.
Yeah, let's put him in this hoodie that we didn't find in their closet.
No. It's just about, it really seemed, at least to me, like a pretty scientific thing. They took a lot of time with it.
All right.
So Marcel and LaRue were arrested for their link to the bank cards of the dead, but not the murders, right? All they can do is link them to the money. So in her interview, Marcel claims LaRue got the cards from a group of Nigerians who had killed the victims. And beyond that, she was super uncooperative and even specifically was like talking a lot of trash to Ben Boyesen, who was like pretty like, wow, she was really aggressive.
His mouth's just getting spikier and spikier.
He's such a great character. LaRue, however, immediately confesses to all of the murders. He says he acted alone. He strangled everyone himself. But Ben Boyesen, our lone wolf, noted that LaRue was fairly small and thin. Yeah. And Ben thought there's no way this kid could lift the bodies himself. So who could he possibly be protecting? Right. Now, at this point, the Steyn kid's mother, Muriel Steyn, was beside herself. She was all over the press talking about how she was blindsided by the accusations and begging people to pray for her children. So on the surface, on some level, it kind of felt like a crazy mistake. Like, Muriel was this well-loved and respected teacher and a single mother, and neither of her children had ever been in trouble with the police, any kind of legal trouble. But here's the thing. Based on the sophistication and the style of the crimes, Ben Boyesen was positive that the appointment murders couldn't have been the first time the Steyn kids or whoever committed the murders had killed someone. Right.
What's so sophisticated about it? You just made an appointment. I guess it takes a lot of work.
Like,
right.
You know
and
what
no
I mean?
Witnesses and stuff.
There's no witnesses.
Yeah.
They didn't have, the only thing they had to go off of was the ATM footage. I mean, it happened really quickly. You know, between the person disappearing and the body being found was very quickly, you know, and this person were quick and fast and is consistent.
I get the sophistication there. I mean, something about strangling in garbage bags and trunks of cars.
I mean, it's horrific,
right?
But it's definitely, I mean, I think that's the thing when you think about serial killers,
right?
It's that when you really do something like that, when somebody has the capacity to do that, it's actually not as easy as it seems.
No, like, I know. I can't even go to the grocery store without knocking all the oranges into the aisle.
Right. I mean, we're exposed to this through like movies and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, I mean, he just did this, and this. But it's like, that's funny about the oranges. But it's that's not, you know, anything that people actually have, teenagers have the capacity to do first time out of the gate very well.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, totally. No fingerprints on the cars, nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
So Ben Boyesen believes, right, there has to be other murders connected to the case. So he starts looking into similar murders, and they found the Myers murders, which was an unsolved case at the time.
Murders.
Yes. So on November 27th, 2015, so just less than a year prior, successful business owners Peter and Joan Meyer were found stabbed to death in their luxury Krugersdorp home in an apparent random attack. So before he was killed, Peter Meyer actually called a close friend to come over as a favor. He called his friend and he said some representatives from the South African government were coming to his home to talk about investing in his businesses, but that he had this weird feeling about the meeting. And so he was just calling this friend to come and sit in on the meeting with him in case something went south, right? So the friend agrees, no problem, and decides he's going to come over, right? But on the evening of November 27th, this friend was running behind and actually ended up missing the meeting entirely. So that night, the Myers were stabbed to death in their home, and police didn't really have any solid leads. However, around the time of the murders, one of the investigating officers had actually interviewed Muriel Steyn because he noticed Muriel had an appointment with the Myers right around the time of their deaths.
Oh, scandals.
Yeah, and there was video footage from the home security cameras clearly showing Miranda entering the Meyer home.
Yeah.
On November 27th.
Was there any validity to the South African government having a meeting? And
nobody knew what happened.
Yeah.
You know, like that case remained unsolved up until this point.
Yeah.
All they knew was that Miranda had gone there, and she's obviously not a part of the South African government. So based on her background at the time, she seemed like not a very likely candidate for this violent type of stabbing. You know, she's just this like well-known school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And it seemed like maybe a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But since her children had been involved in the appointment murders, they decided to give Miranda another look.
Yeah.
So as they're looking into Miranda, the lone wolf, Ben Boyson, gets a tip to search Miranda's classroom. He doesn't know why, but he's like, okay, I'll do it. So he goes into the classroom, and the first thing he notices is that the classroom is covered in Bible verses, like as decorations or like hanging from things on the blackboard. There's just a lot of Bible verses everywhere.
Yeah. Is it a Christian school?
I don't know. I think that from what I've read, it seems like there's not like a strong separation between church and state, maybe. Yeah. But I don't really know.
Either way, it definitely caught his eye. He was like, even if this is a very Christian school, there's a lot of that going on in this room.
Regardless of like whether or not it was a Christian school, it was like a strong presence in her classroom specifically.
Got it.
So Ben meticulously goes through everything in sight, but he comes up with nothing until he notices 2 stoves sitting against the wall. So at one point, Miranda's classroom was a home economics classroom, but it wasn't anymore. And he was like, well, why are these stoves still here, right? So he walks over and he opens these old stoves, and they were both completely filled with live ammunition.
What? Damn. That's...
So up until this, right? So that's like crazy.
I thought he was going to be like this really great detective who like opens it. There's like one piece of paper that's from a Bible from like a different continent. And he's like, how did they get this piece of paper? It's just straight up bullets. Oh, shit.
Hell of bullets. So, and after this, like at this point, you know, he's in there investigating Miranda, and the schoolmaster and his wife are mad about it, right? They didn't really want to let him into the classroom. They're like, you're harassing this good woman. She's an excellent teacher.
He does like 5 karate moves. He's like Chuck Norris. So like, fine, go in there.
So after he finds the bullets, they're like, oh.
My bad. Good on you. Good on you. Okay. Our fault. Right. Okay. Anything else you want to search?
Right. And the wife of the headmaster of the school kind of comes forward with a new piece of information.
Oh, man.
She said recently Miranda had done something out of character. So apparently, I don't think this is out of the ordinary for this area, but apparently Miranda kept her will at the school. So that was part of the documents that she kept in a safe at the school, right?
Okay, so people just walk around with wills?
Well, no, it's in a safe in a school. They're not just.
But they just have them in different places.
Yeah, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's where she keeps her will, is at the school.
So that wasn't the weird part.
No.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Okay. So it's not.
You're okay.
It's totally chill that her will is at the school.
As far as I can tell, that's not the weird part.
Okay.
But she comes forward and she says, recently, right when her children were arrested, she came to the school really quickly and had the will changed. Mm-hmm. And it turns out, while Miranda had been publicly defending her children, she had actually gone in and completely cut them out of her will.
Damn.
Leaving everything to a woman named Ceclia Steyn, of no relation.
Oh, okay, just another Steyn.
Another Steyn.
Okay, great.
So at this point, the lone wolf had made some progress with LaRue. Right?
I'm sorry. Does he call himself the lone wolf, or you just call him the lone wolf?
Well, we know what we're talking about because he's badass, right?
Old Chucky Wolfman. Okay.
Chucky Wolfman. So the lone wolf had made some progress with LaRue. So LaRue had actually told him, other people were involved in this murder. Mm-hmm. You're right about that, but I love them and I refuse to throw them under the bus. But the lone wolf figured that LaRue's mother's new will might give him some leverage in these talks. Right?
Yeah.
So Ben Boyson showed up to the jail and he passes LaRue the will. And LaRue reads it and he starts crying. And then he says something along the lines of, F her, now they're all going down.
Oh, yeah. Right. Well, I mean, she's a school teacher, so I'm guessing she does not leaving behind some fat estate, or has she been secretly like accumulating
What do we
wealth?
say about questions, my love?
I ask the questions and you answer them eventually when you feel like it.
It's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
But I would say whatever it was very effective. And I think some of that is also just symbolic, you know, to cut your kids completely out of your will when they're in this situation.
Yeah, right.
So he's crying.
Yeah.
He's like super upset, and he turns to Ben Boysen and he says, guess what, dude? My family has been killing people since way back in 2012 under the command of a 42nd generational witch.
That's oh my, I'm so sad that people are dead, but that's the coolest thing ever. What the hell is a 42nd generational witch? I wish it was a movie and not real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. All right.
So so that's where we're at, right?
Yeah.
And I'm going to take a little time to kind of talk about the witch thing.
Are you the witch, Muriel? I feel like you're a 42nd generational witch. What the hell is going on here?
Okay, so the witch thing isn't that crazy given the history of the area in Krugersdorp. So
yeah, I'm normalizing witches. I love a good witch.
Okay. Everybody shut up now. I'm going to talk to you about this history, and it's a little complicated, so
okay.
I need you to focus.
Impossible. I can't wait for the goths to come into play. All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so according to the documentary Devilsdorp, there was an upsurge in violent satanic crimes after apartheid ended in the early 90s.
Okay.
So that's something to think about.
All right.
So before the early 90s, there were like 2 satanic murders a year. So these are murders involving occult themes or claimed by someone affiliated with the cult or the occult or something like that, right? After apartheid ended, the number shot up to 16 Satanist murders a year.
Whoa.
And officials were concerned that this could become a growing trend
Yeah.
for some reason or another.
Yeah.
So the documentary had this really interesting argument for why there was a spike in satanic crimes or satanic panic after apartheid ended. And I'm going to give a shot in explaining it. They do a really great job of doing it, but I just thought this was kind of interesting, and it gives you a good context for like the rest of this thing unfolding.
Sure.
So this is like a basic overview. The topic is more nuanced than this.
Of
but
course.
we're just kind of getting a basic idea.
Yeah.
Right? So among other things, the apartheid government in South Africa historically suppressed communist groups. They had legislation literally called the Suppression of Communism Act of 1950, right? So that's a part of the platform. And atheism is a core value of sort of foundational Marxist style communism, right? And the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa publicly supported apartheid and the National Party who enacted it. So the documentary argues that from the ruling National Party's perspective, apartheid was sort of waging a war against communism. And so ultimately, it was waging a war for God against Satan, right? And preventing Satan from demolishing the nation's Christian values.
Okay.
So that became a huge part of the way that people were viewing the government.
All right.
And because of this history, the military and police all had different theological positions basically built in to the structures of these governmental structures for preachers and reverends and different people to kind of, I don't know, have a presence within policing and governmental organizations.
Okay.
And police would even have lectures and camps to teach them about communist danger and that danger in relation to religion.
Okay.
Right? So it was like a big kind of indoctrination.
Yeah.
So with all that history in mind, as apartheid was ending and satanic crimes were spiking, everyone's like, oh, it's proving it right. On February 2nd, 1992, the South African police formed the Occult-Related Crimes Unit. So this unit was formed to investigate satanic crimes and witchcraft. And it was headed by a man named Quabus Yonker, which is the greatest name.
Quabus?
Yeah. And for me not knowing exactly, I had to like listen to the video to figure out how to pronounce these names. But phonetically, it's Corbus Jonker. If I was going to read it, which also is a great name. So the unit was disbanded in 2000.
Okay.
Now, according to Quabus, around 2,000 satanic cases took place in the West Rand area during his time with the occult unit. So there were a lot. And he said if you would walk around the area, you'd find little occult items all over the place in ditches or streams or fields or whatever. And it was really common to find burned items and different things like that. Butchered cats they would find. Yeah.
They're like a lot of litter and then some murdered animals.
Right. So that's the history of the area, specifically in the West Rand, is that there was this big spike in cases and they had a special police unit to sort of look into those cases. There's also another rumor that Krugersdorp is perfect for Satanism because it has 5 entrances. And if you draw a line from the 5 entrances, it forms a pentagram, which I tried to do, and I don't think that's true. I just sat here. Nick was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm just doing research.
Just drawing pentagram, unleashing some demon forces from within your paper.
No, it's me just going like, this isn't working. I was like, is that an entrance? Anyway, I tried to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's a stretch, but whatever. Maybe somebody understands something I don't.
Can I interject something real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. I also want to say that I have heard interviews and read some about Satanism, and it's not all murders and burning cats and stuff. There's some chill Satanists out there, and I happen to know that for a fact.
Okay. Good.
So we're not sitting here saying if you're satanic, then you also kill people or hurt things.
Okay. That's good. I'm glad you...
because that is true.
Okay, great. So after the year 2000, this special occult unit is disbanded. And the focus on Satanism wasn't an official part of things anymore in the area, right?
Okay.
But the idea of Satanism being ever present and the idea that one of these roles of government was to protect people from Satan was still prevalent, right? And there were still freaky things going on. So all of it still persisted. And then the super freaky thing went on called the Samurai Incident. So on Monday, August 18th, 2008, this sort of 18-year-old dude named Morn Harmsey, he was basically just a normal teenage kid. He came to school out of nowhere with 3 of his friends and these masks that they made that are based on like Slipknot, the band.
Oh, yeah.
And a bunch of samurai swords. And they're all kind of messing around. And one kid at the school is like, oh, that guy's off his rocker. And this guy, Mornay, just turned around and killed him with a samurai sword. And, you know, the Slipknot masks have a lot of like devil imagery. And people were just like, why? Like, it seems such a random thing.
Yeah.
And so that sort of escalated some of the local feelings about, you know, protecting your kids from Satan and stuff like that.
Right. All this rock music and video games and samurai swords.
Right. And after this DVD kind of took hold in the area. It went viral, as you would say, before the, you know...
Internet?
Well, it wasn't before the internet.
Right.
As soon as I said that, I was like, whatever. But it was this DVD called Spiritual House Cleaning. And it totally took hold in the West Rand community. And basically, it's this guy, Tion Gildenhuys from Pretoria, that's like kind of nearby Krugersdorp.
Yeah.
He released this DVD describing how certain objects in your home can invite demons in. So people in Krugersdorp were purging their homes. They're watching this DVD and they're sort of purging their homes of these objects to protect the children and to keep Satan out of their home. And of course, the objects are, you know, Harry Potter and children's books that have fairies on them and a painting of a unicorn. Anything that had anything to do with magic, anything that having to do with Santa Claus. He has like a big... I watched one of his videos. You can find them online.
Yeah.
Like he goes off against Spider-Man because Spider-Man is actually a metaphor for entrapment in the web of Satan. You know, so it's very like
that
broad.
Kind of thing. Got it.
And then any type of piercing, all that kind of stuff. So people were purging their homes, you know, around this time, like between 2008, 2010, were purging their homes of these objects and burning them, right? So during all of this, a local woman named Ria Grunwald founded a ministry called Overcomers Through Christ in 2006. So she was basically a religious educator. I don't know that much about like the difference between a church and a ministry. I think a ministry is like a religious based group that does things.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what she would do is kind of teach classes and go to schools and different churches and do like segments, right?
All right.
And based on the footage from the Devilsdorp documentary, I would say her style is kind of, I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but it's kind of like warriors for Christ. Like there's a documentary called Jesus Camp.
That's an incredible movie.
Right. It's really great. And it talks about like the segment of evangelicals in the U.S. who believe that they're essentially preparing for a war.
Yeah. And that kids need to be really protected.
And like indoctrinated or educated from a young age to feel like they need to go out and be like, you know, there's a lot of just war imagery.
Yeah, like
in that.
we're the army of Christ
exactly.
and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that style or whatever of religion, that's kind of what she's into. So you hear a lot of, we have to fight against Satan, right? And he's our enemy, that kind of thing.
So I'm guessing she's a big fan of this DVD saying to throw away the unicorns and Harry Potters.
Right. And that's why I wanted to kind of talk about that is because that's what people are kind of coming out of in this environment, in this community. Right?
Yeah.
So Ria enrolled in training to counsel people who have been victims of satanic ritual abuse. She trained under a psychologist named F.H. Havinga, and F.H. Havinga worked with the occult crimes unit when it was still around. So he had a ton of education and then a ton of like practical experience with the police. And he also founded Alpha Trauma and Support Center in Kempton Park, South Africa. So he calls himself a professional Christian psychological counselor.
Yeah.
And F.H. Havinga basically worked with community volunteers and trained them to help support people, hold interventions, or perform caregiving tasks. So he wasn't training them to be psychologists, but he was training them to be better at helping people through these events.
Yeah, with PTSD and stuff. And what are the types of events? Like I witnessed a cat getting burned at an occult thing, or like I was hurt.
They're focused a lot, as far as I can tell, on like cult member deprogramming and having a specialization in the occult. So whatever that means, if you've been traumatized by some aspect of the occult.
Right. And I'm guessing they're also probably interpreting traumatized as if just as like your mother believed in that and you kind of are sympathetic to it and we want to get that out of you.
You know, it's funny. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that.
Sure.
I mean, I think there's two things going on in the documentary. On the one hand, it feels like there's a lot of satanic panic, like this type of interpreting lots of things that are kind of benign as being indications of a cult, and how that derailed different investigations, right? But at the same time, this person, F.H. Havinga, seems to me like he's more focused on just getting people well. So it really is about whatever the reason. They're there to train community members to help people who, for whatever reason, can't grocery shop or do things on their own, or needs help breaking out of the cult mindset or doing any of that kind of stuff. He felt there was a need for that in the community, and so that's what they provide. So there's like a cynical way of looking at it, but then there's also like a practical way of looking at it. And I think that his role in this story seems to me like he's more on the practical side, but I wouldn't know. I haven't taken his class or anything.
Right. You need to, you little 40-second witch. All right.
Stop. So through her training with F.H. Havinga and through her ministry, Ria became known as an authority figure in the community on helping people out of the occult.
Yeah.
Right? So one day, Ria Grunwald gets a call from a woman who claimed she had just escaped from the satanic church and she urgently needed help. So Ria said she knew God had chosen her to save this particular woman because it turns out she was a 42nd generational satanic witch, which means every woman before her was a satanic witch for 42 generations.
Wow. And she's like, I got to get out of this horrible family tree.
She is one of the highest witches in the country who was actually the bride of Satan. And the thing is that this lady was over it and she wanted to leave. She told Rhea that due to her high rank in the satanic church, the church wouldn't allow her to leave and that she was in grave danger. So Rhea is super pumped to help this witch.
She's like, this is what we play for, everyone.
Exactly. And she's in it from the beginning. And F.H. Havinga later said that he had reservations right away. He said Rhea would call him, whispering into the telephone about how Satanists were listening in on the sound waves they were generating. So like immediately red flags are going up, and he was worried that Rhea had been going rogue and not really following her training. And rather she was getting sucked up in this strange situation, right? So Havinga kind of tries to intervene, right? He tries to meet the witch. He's like, okay, fine, let's take a deep breath. Why don't you let me meet the witch? But Rhea says, no, you can't meet her because she can't go beyond 30 kilometers from her house without death curses being activated upon her. So she has to stay in her house. And Havinga tries to talk to her. He's like, Rhea, you have training. You have the skills to deprogram this type of thinking. Like, remember, plus you're supposed to be functioning under my supervision, right? In my organization. And she just basically said, I'm working with God now. And she bounced with the witch. She got out of there.
We got another lone wolf on our hands.
Exactly. And this witch's name was Ceclia Steyn. So Rhea was super excited to be working with Ceclia. There was another clinical psychologist, Louis Auerbach, and he guessed that the reason why Rhea was pumped about this was because it basically validated all her beliefs in this really extreme way.
Yeah, right. I get it.
Cecilia, in her existence, gives Rhea the absolute proof that Satanism exists, and that her life's mission is valid.
And this woman really will die if she goes 30 kilometers past her house.
She's believed every
Does Havinga believe that part? Or he just believes like that's just them being tricked? Those types of curses aren't real. All of that.
I can't answer that. I don't know. But what I do know is what his response is like, this seems like really dangerous behavior. This doesn't seem logical. And you're not following your training. So I feel if Rhea is not following her training, then probably his perspective is, I don't know how valid he thinks it is, but he seems to think that she's being sucked up in this delusion when you listen to his interviews. So I can't say if he believes those things are true, but he definitely felt like the way Rhea believed those things were true seemed like red flags to him.
I'm going to ask a question and you might get mad at me, but I can't tell. I'll just make a statement. How about that? I can't tell if this witch really wants out or is trying to take down one of the top warriors on the other army.
Good. Know? That's good.
Everyone needs to learn in relationships to say I feel statements.
Yeah, that's good.
I feel that there's a fork in the road.
That's good. Okay. That's good. Lead it.
The witch could be trying to get out or could be trying to take down her top enemy. All right.
Okay. Lean into that. That's,
okay, good.
That's the question of the story.
I feel like I want you to continue now.
Great. So Rhea ends up going completely rogue and opening her own counseling center in 2012, so to teach people about satanic abuse with a course called Know Your Enemy. So the whole course is based on Cecilia's stories about her relationship with the devil. And Cecilia would attend classes and sort of sit at the front of the room as proof that even a 42nd generational witch could escape Satanism. So now, as you can tell, this ministry is incredibly Satan focused. Which was weird for some people, right? But for others, it attracted a lot of people who are interested in this idea. The idea being like, we've talked a lot about being good, but what if we really learn about what it is to be bad?
Yeah, that sounds pretty good, actually.
Right? I mean, it's like a war tactic, like learn how the enemy works and know how to combat them. So this class was just essentially all Satan all the time.
Right.
So one of the people attracted to this ministry was a woman named Michaela Valentine. So she was deeply religious and at times even acted as a lay preacher. And after struggling with substance abuse, the 26-year-old became a devout Christian. She even went to Bible college, and she married a man named Zach Valentine, who was a successful financial advisor in the area who shared her religious beliefs, right? So
Financial advisor? Okay.
So Zach and Michaela Valentine were attracted to Rhea's teachings, along with Miranda Steyn and her 2 children, LaRue and Marcel. So they started actually going with their mother to Rhea's night classes when they were around 10 and 12. So they had been with Rhea for a long time, since the beginning of her ministry. Yeah. And the family met Cecilia when LaRue and Marcel were 14 and 16. So while developing and teaching her Know Your Enemy course, Cecilia told Rhea that now that she had left the Church of Satan, she had to have help 24 hours a day to be protected from Satan. So eventually that became too much for Rhea to do on her own. Like, you're running this class, you're doing this ministry, and you're with her, basically trying to be with her 24 hours a day.
It sort of seems like at that point you're literally worshiping this 42nd witch.
Well, we'll keep going.
Okay.
So she pulls in some people to help her. One of those people was Miranda Steyn and a woman named Candace Rijevec. So they were pulled in to help watch Cecilia, and they all became very close, almost like sisters.
Yeah.
Miranda loved Cecilia. She admired her. She was very captivated by her stories.
Yeah.
And she would spend the night at Cecilia's house all the time with her kids, eventually moving into the same apartment building with her children so she could be right nearby.
What were some of the stories she would tell?
Well, I'll tell you.
Good. I demand nothing less.
So Cecilia lived in the Costanza Flats, right across the street from the Krugersdorp private hospital. And she told the ministry that she had to stay there because she needed to be near the hospital at all times. Apparently, she had over 1,000 different personalities, and they all had different blood types depending on which personality was inhabiting her body at the time.
Yeah.
And when demons used to attack her for leaving the church, she needed to get a blood transfusion occasionally. And she needed her blood type tested every time she got the blood transfusion to make sure that it was going to the right personality. Okay. So she had to stay by the hospital.
All right. That seems like seems like she didn't need to mention that at all. She's like, yeah, I live by the hospital.
No, I think it's pretty important. It's 1,000 different personalities, and they would come out. She would be talking to people and turn into a little girl. And then if the demons attack the girl, then she's a type O. So then she has to go and get tested so she can get blood transfusions.
Damn, man, these witches are high maintenance.
So the other thing that she would tell people, she told them about this thing called quote unquote high nights. So these were particularly dangerous nights for Cecilia. High nights were specific dates Cecilia explained were important to the Satanists, like Halloween or things like that. And the group would have to gather at her unit in the Costanza Flats to pray for Cecilia. So they would all be around her in the living room, chilling, hanging out, and things would be calm at first. They'd listen to gospel music and sing along and talk. Mm-hmm. Now, what Cecilia told everyone was that her body was in the room, so she would sit there kind of dormant, but her soul was in another spot, viewing like a human sacrifice or a satanic ritual or something.
Yeah.
So she would be sitting in the middle of the room for the first half of it, and then eventually things would go totally nutty. So F.H. Havinga actually received a tape in the mail from Rhea of one of these high nights. And basically, Cecilia is sitting in a chair chilling, and then she starts convulsing and vomiting up like massive amounts of blood.
Oh my God.
And
really?
The church ladies like grab her and they hold her and they like try to keep her from seizing. And then they all go, morphine, morphine, morphine. And they inject her with morphine. And Havinga got this tape and he was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Right? So it really helps solidify this idea that she constantly needs supervision and she constantly needs people surrounding her. And Cecilia's inner circle, who watched over her 24/7, included Zach and Michaela Valentine, Candace Rijevec, Miranda Steyn, and her two children, LaRue and Marcel.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Rhea. Rhea basically gave up her entire family to watch over Cecilia. So Cecilia was the center of the ministry and its teachings, basically. She was the most important person in the group. And in a lot of ways, she was the de facto leader because now she's the authority on everything that they're studying.
Yeah.
So she gets to say that's right, that's not right, based on everything.
Yeah, it sounds like this woman probably was not the 42nd generational witch, and she's like, I want to be a witch. How do I do it? And then just came up with the best plan ever to be a leader.
I don't know. I'm not telling you.
Okay.
So basically, eventually, it was just too much Satan, right? Rhea decided, okay, I got to maybe reshift my focus. There's a lot of Satan-focused stuff going on.
Yeah.
People were concerned about this effort to deeply know Satan and kind of not study any other part of the Bible. So, like, people were kind of being like, okay, Rhea, like, other people in the ministry who weren't really sucked into the Cecilia orbit were just a little put off by the thing eventually.
Yeah, it's like a secret spy who just gets sucked in too deep into like whatever thing they were trying to uncover.
Right. So Rhea shakes it off and she ends up hooking up with an old mentor and friend, Pastor Reginald Bendixson, to develop a new Satan-free course called Know Your Savior, right? So a companion piece.
Yeah.
But this, of course, takes Cecilia out of the spotlight. And Rhea starts spending more time with Reg than Cecilia, which Cecilia felt was completely out of line.
Yeah.
When Rhea didn't include Cecilia in the second course at all, Cecilia gets furious. And Rhea and Cecilia have this huge falling out.
Classic narcissist move.
So after they're falling out, Cecilia tells the group a secret that she'd been keeping. Cecilia reveals that she actually had a satanic family that she hadn't told anyone about, who kept her safe in the satanic realm. But unfortunately, just now, as soon as Rhea left, the devil killed her mom. So, big deal. Now she doesn't have a protector. Her mom is dead in the satanic realm. But as luck would have it, right before she died, her mom transferred her magical powers onto Rhea. So in order for Cecilia to stay alive, she needed Rhea to be her new mom and pay attention to her all the time. So
I'm sorry, man. I know some friends get clingy, and I know some people really like to grab a hold of the people in their lives and own them, but damn, that's a whole nother level.
So they're all sitting in the living room, and Rhea is like, I can't do this.
I'm not your mother.
But Rhea believes with her whole heart that all of this is true.
Right.
So Rhea tries to transfer the magical powers onto Mirinda. But unfortunately, according to Cecilia, the magical powers were non-transferable.
Even though they just got transferred.
Well, she's not a witch.
Right.
So, meaning...
Rhea's
not a witch, right? Rhea, like the Satan mom can do it. She's got all the powers. Rhea doesn't have any powers, right? Yeah. She can't transfer it.
I love that. Cecilia is like, actually, sorry, Rhea, you are now a Satan witch yourself.
Yes, right. So despite all of this, right, and being trapped, Rhea's in this position. Now she has to be Cecilia's new mom. Rhea decides to dip anyway. She's going to leave. And Cecilia is pissed, right? So after Rhea leaves, Cecilia tells everyone that the reason why Rhea is leaving is because her ministry is corrupted by Satan and it's leading people astray. Then she started her own group, Electus per Deus, or Chosen by God, with, among others, Mirinda and her kids and the Valentines.
So this Mirinda and her kids were with Rhea from way back in the day, move into the flat, go with her on this whole, like, now we're focusing on Satan thing, but doesn't go with Rhea.
They don't go with Rhea back.
To Know Your Savior. They're like, we like it here in the Satan circle.
They're living in the same apartment complex. They're at that house all the time.
Right.
And they're staying. So everything escalated pretty quickly. They were all soon tattooed with the name of the group, and they all started dressing super goth, right? Black hair, black clothes. There's pictures of Cecilia with like fake, like fang caps.
Yeah. So at this point, is she saying I've been saved, or is she saying welcome to the dark side?
No, she's saying I've been saved. She's just saying in order to know God, you have to know Satan.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much sense this makes.
Right.
At this point, the group is still very solidly Christian, or
Yeah.
they feel that they're very solidly Christian.
Right.
They're just following the right person instead of the wrong person.
Yeah, and to be honest, I knew very few goths in middle school and high school growing up in the circles I grew up in. There weren't a lot, but the goths I knew were so sweet and so nice.
Yeah.
I miss them.
Okay. So Cecilia tells everyone in the group that they have to start paying her a tithe, right? A percentage of their income, like a religious tithe. So she could continue to fund her orphanage.
Oh my God.
So according to Cecilia,
Yeah.
somewhere in America, there's an orphanage in a forest for abandoned children of Satanists.
Yeah.
So I guess witches would decide at the last minute not to sacrifice their firstborn children to Satan. And then they would steal them away and give them to Cecilia instead. And then Cecilia would put them in this orphanage that she ran.
Okay.
So the group would pay directly into Cecilia's bank account, and she would transfer the funds to the orphanage.
Muriel's doing air quotes, everyone.
So Zach himself, who's like this well-off man who works in finance,
Yeah.
he would transfer 100,000 Rand a month, like twice the amount of the average annual salary a month, into Cecilia's bank account.
Oh my God.
Meanwhile, Rhea is still teaching her Know Your Savior course with Reg and holding Bible meetings and stuff. So she's kind of fully transitioned back into talking about God. Now, one night, she heard horrible screaming coming from outside her apartment. So the Bible study group runs outside and they find Cecilia covered in blood. Because apparently, due to Rhea's neglect, Cecilia had been attacked by witches.
Yeah.
So after that, Rhea started receiving these text messages from witches in the Church of Satan. And the messages said if she didn't stop the Bible studies and start spending more time with Cecilia, the witches would continue to beat up Cecilia. So at this point, Rhea's totally freaked because she definitely thinks these are real witches.
Yeah.
So she arranges for one final secret Bible study just to kind of say goodbye to that part of her life.
Yeah, slip a little Know Your Savior in there.
She's going to do it. But on the night of the meeting, petrol bombs were set off in the parking lot. And then that same night, a church led by one of the people from the Bible study group almost burned to the ground.
Oh, yeah. So they're actually causing war at this point. Molotov cocktailing that stuff.
Yeah. So the same year, this is all happening in like 1 year, right? The same year in 2012, there were 4 murders in Krugersdorp that police dubbed the satanic murders.
Oh, no.
So on July 26, 2012, police responded to an emergency call from a resident in a gated community. And there they found 33-year-old Natasha Berger dead on the floor of her neighbor's living room. Natasha had multiple stab wounds and was found holding a handwritten note from her neighbor, 63-year-old Joy Bouzaire. So in the bedroom, they find the body of Joy in a pool of blood. She'd also been stabbed to death.
God damn.
And when police came in, they found books and pamphlets about Satanism called Know Your Enemy. And there were some candles on the mantle above the fireplace. So at first, police assumed the murders were occult related.
Yeah.
As in, Natasha and Joy were potentially involved in their own deaths. Right? That these were people who practiced the occult and were murdered. And so they somehow have some
Culpability or something?
right in their own murder.
Okay.
And that's just a part of the initial sort of surveying of the scene.
Sure.
Less than a month later, on August 13th, 2012, police find the body of Rhea's friend and collaborator, Pastor Reginald Bendixson.
Oh, damn.
His wife pulled into their driveway and found Reg face down in the yard. He had also been stabbed to death. And the murder was so violent, police again viewed the murder suspiciously connected to the occult. So while they're investigating this, they're investigating them as murders.
Yeah.
But, they're coming into these essentially these Christian families and saying like, yeah, but this connection might mean that this person's also culpable. So everyone's kind of under investigation.
Okay.
Right? On the day of Reg's funeral, Rhea calls police hysterical, having found a lump of what ended up being raw pork on her doorstep.
Yeah.
And it was wrapped in a handwritten note saying, sorry, this is all the doggies left you. Here's a piece of your precious Reggie.
Oh, that is so jacked up.
Yeah. So they're getting all of this like crazy stuff is happening, right?
Yeah.
And police start their investigation.
Is this after the occult branch of the police or whatever has been shut down?
Right. So this is 2012.
Right.
And that branch was shut down in the year 2000.
Oh, okay.
So
12 years. Okay.
there are people that like F.H. Havinga and people who were at some point on that occult task force who are now not, but still in the police force. But that police force is not
up and active and right.
Right. There are people that are still consulted from that police force, but that's not what's leading the investigation.
Got it.
So police began interviewing the remaining members of the Overcomers Through Christ group. And while they're doing that, Rhea also points them to Cecilia and the Electus Per Deus group, right? So Captain Van Wyck, who was the lead investigator at the time, went to Cecilia's home in the Cossana Flats to interview her. And I have to say, this documentary, Devilsdorp, has a lot of great footage of Cecilia, including this interview and then later interview we're going to talk about with another authority figure. And I think it has to do with her concept of maybe getting the upper hand, but she's like hilariously edgy, like quote unquote edgy.
Oh yeah.
When she talks to people. So the people who interview her are generally really baffled. It's like her inner circle really buys into the power that she has.
Right.
But the people who come from the outside and come in who don't buy into that are just like, what is up with this lady?
She's right. She's like dumps a glass of water on the ground and is like, what are you going to do now?
During the whole meeting she had with Captain Van Wyck, she wouldn't sit on the couch. She perched herself on the back of the couch, like on the top of it where the headrest is.
Yeah, right. She's like a gargoyle. They're like, just sit on the couch. She's like,
Yeah, like crossing her arms and posturing and sitting on the back of the couch. And Captain Van Wyck is like, I think she was trying to intimidate me or like show me she's a really unique person.
Yeah, totally. You know? Oh no, it's just like this horrible like fake personality thing.
Well, it reminds me of high school in so many ways, or like middle school, you know.
Yeah.
But regardless, police have this strange case on their hands, right? They have two women who each had ministries that included elements of the occult, right? Mm-hmm. Because Rhea now is Know Your Savior, but I mean, she was notorious for Know Your Enemy, right? And because Rhea had uprooted her life to support Cecilia, both women actually lived on the same street and they knew all the same people. Yeah. And all the threatening text messages that Rhea were receiving from witches were coming from that geographical area, the geographical area including both women's houses, right? So as far as Captain Wyck was concerned, both women were suspects. And investigators were starting to turn up the heat. So they go and they search all of Rhea's properties and her vehicles, right? And they come up basically empty-handed. They came up with more at Cecilia's place. They found an axe, knives, photo evidence of petrol bombs. None of them connected them directly to the crimes that have happened, but they are elements of crimes that have happened, right? And then they find all these photos of the group dressed up like Marilyn Manson with these like fake white contacts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
After that, the suspects were updated to include Mirinda and then both Zach and Michaela Valentine.
Yeah.
Michaela's parents at this point had been pretty freaked out by the Know Your Enemy course and Cecilia since the beginning. Just too much Satan in their opinion, right?
Yeah.
Plus, Michaela had really changed since he got involved with the women in general. Like she had dyed her hair black and done some other stuff.
Yeah.
And later in 2012, Michaela calls her parents hysterical, saying, quote, people had been murdered and that she needed a lawyer. And Michaela's mom decides to relay that to police. And based on that interview with Michaela's mom, police applied for a warrant to search the Valentine property. 2 days later, on October 4th, 2012, Zach Valentine came home from work and found Michaela's body in their bed.
Oh, man.
She had been stabbed 63 times.
Oh, my God.
And the murder was extremely violent. There was blood from the floor to the ceiling. It was all over the walls. So the person who did it seemed to be completely out of control, possessed,
Yeah.
demonic, right?
Right.
And on one of the walls, it was covered in handwritten Bible verses.
Oh, man.
So Captain Van Wyck, for his part, believed all the satanic imagery and all that stuff was a smokescreen to mask just plain old serial killing.
Yeah. Right.
But within the police department and the press, the narrative kept being skewed towards satanic and demonic involvement.
Yeah.
Over kind of like a practical criminal investigation.
Yeah.
So he kept finding himself at odds with people who were trying to
make this about God.
Yeah, like, or just like put too much significance into certain elements that might be neutral to other people, you know, that they weren't objectively elements of importance. Like,
right.
for instance, the candles in Joy's home, they say, well, that's an occult element. And it's like, yeah, but lots of people have candles in their home.
Yeah.
You know, so he was struggling with some of that. But I think the powers that be knew that he was right. For whatever reason, he was definitely solidly the lead investigator in the case. They were going to follow Van Wyck's lead on that. And Van Wyck ended up being so consumed with the case that he and his wife actually divorced.
Oh, man.
And after the divorce, the case was inexplicably taken away from him. He doesn't know why, but they took him off the case completely and given to another officer. And as soon as that happened, the investigation went cold and the 4 2012 satanic murders remained unsolved.
Man, it would just seem like there'd be so much evidence to go off of. Handwritten things on the walls.
I know.
So much blood. And I mean, they...
Well, there's another element that we'll talk about the reason why it went cold, potentially, but we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. It sounds like there was some shady police stuff going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the devil's reach goes wide. I don't know. I just tried.
So the murders go cold. And then on December 16th, 2015, 3 years after the satanic murders, Zach Valentine dies in a fiery car crash. So we're going to close that chapter for now, and we're going to go back to 2016.
Okay.
So in 2016, investigating officer Captain Ben Boyson, the lone wolf,
Stop.
got a breakthrough.
Okay.
A confession from LaRue that linked the appointment murders to the previously unsolved satanic murders, right? LaRue's basically like, you think I have information on the appointment murders? Hold on, dear Cosmo. I've got information on all the satanic murders and the witch who made me do it, right? So he's spilling the beans on everything.
Yeah.
So after he talks to LaRue and learns about what LaRue knows about the satanic murders, Ben Boyson goes to get the case files, right? So he heads to the station. He goes to get the case files, but they're all missing. Basically 4 to 5 wheelbarrows of documents are missing from the police
They're gone.
station, right?
The lone wolf is on the hunt.
He is. He is not to be deterred. So he goes and he contacts Captain Van Wyck for consultation. And both men feel that something was way off. There's no way that many documents could be unintentionally misplaced, right? At any rate, Boyson now has to reconstruct all the missing documents from the satanic murders and interview witnesses all over again.
Right.
But by this point, the really important witnesses are all too scared to talk. He would get people into like interrogation booths or whatever. And they would literally cry when he was interviewing them. People were scared.
Oh my God, I could imagine.
Yeah, right. And Boyson decided, okay, I'm just going to focus on Rhea Grunwald as a key witness. But after he contacts Rhea, Rhea fled Krugersdorp. She just left in the middle of the night to avoid being interviewed.
Oh my God. He's like, hi, this is Detective Lone Wolf. Is this Rhea? She's like, no, let me go get Rhea. And then just put the phone down and ran away.
She ran away and no one could find her.
Yeah.
And Rhea, for her part, was still completely terrified of Cecilia's magical powers. Eventually, the lone wolf wore her down and she finally agreed to work with him in the prosecution's office, but it took a while, several weeks.
Yeah, he's like, I'm a really good detective. You fled, I found you, do this thing, please.
So while Boyson worked with the prosecutor, Garrett Roberts, to build a case against the Electus Perdays gang, there was trouble with Zach's life insurance payout.
The fiery car crash. R.I.P.
In January 2016, the insurance company flagged Zach Valentine's accidental death claim, and the case was handed to life insurance forensic specialist Shane Chatzkowitz. So the policy was fairly large, insuring Zach's life for about 3.5 million rand. Zach had actually been significantly behind on his payments, and then a week before Zach died, there was a big cash deposit to cover the balance. Allegedly, Zach died in a fire after his car was in an accident and pushed off the road. But after an investigation, they found the vehicle was never actually in an accident, but sort of gently rolled off the side of the road and into a field and then lit on fire. The car itself was completely destroyed except for the license plate, so it was very easy to identify.
Oh.
Police at the time told Zach's mom, they called Zach's mom and they said, hey, his sister has identified the body. But Zach didn't have a sister. And when Zach's mom went down to the station to look at the body, she said he was burned completely beyond recognition. She wouldn't have even been able to identify him.
Yeah.
So she's like,
who's this sister?
Then, like days later, LaRue Steyn calls the insurer holding Zach's life insurance policy. And he calls and says, I'm helping to facilitate the payment of the policy for the beneficiary, Ceclia Steyn.
Damn.
So obviously they didn't pay out the claim pending further investigation, but Cecilia was really upset by that. So she constantly was calling the office, asking for the money. And then she finally demanded a meeting with the investigators. So the insurance forensic specialist guy heads to the Kosana flats in Krugersdorp. And this is another one of those videos. So he had to videotape the recording, the meeting,
right?
Just for work purposes.
Yeah, for legal reasons.
And the video shows Cecilia just like super defensive, sort of arms crossed over her chest. And LaRue is pretending, like clearly pretending to look at his phone, but really just pacing back and forth in the background up and down the hallway, sort of like listening to the conversation. Right?
Yeah.
So that's like what the shot looks like the entire time. And Shane Chatzkowitz noticed their incredibly odd behavior right away. Cecilia says she's Zach's lifelong friend, but she actually didn't even know where he lived and had never been to his house.
Right.
And Cecilia right away starts bragging that she and Zach were so close that he made her the beneficiary of his policy, even when he was married. Like, I was closer to him than he was with his wife.
Yeah.
And Shane goes, oh, what happened to his wife? And Cecilia says, oh, she died like 4 years ago. So Shane knew that Michaela Valentine had been brutally murdered in this like home invasion.
Yeah, this very public thing.
Right. So he was like, this is such a weird reaction, right?
Yeah.
Like, why is she acting like a weirdo? So Shane kind of plays dumb and he asks more questions about Michaela to see what Cecilia would say. And Cecilia says, oh, Michaela was killed during this botched robbery when she tried to call police. And, they caught the two guys who did it. So, I guess that's justice, right? It's all verifiable lies. Like,
weird.
And,
so she's so dumb.
And
also.
she's saying all this stuff. She does this like word vomit. And then she starts going way into detail about the death. So she's like, the car melted and the windshield melted into a ball of glass. Honestly, Zach's arms and legs were burned completely off. Like, just saying all this graphic stuff.
Yeah.
And when Shane offers his condolences, Cecilia responds with, this is the quote, yeah, basically my birthday is screwed. Christmas is screwed every year now. Because he died so close to the holiday.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And the agent, just generally speaking, was like, okay, well, these two are liars and really amateur con artists.
Yeah.
But he just didn't know what they were hiding. Like, lying about Michaela's murder was so weird, and it was weird about the graphic detail of getting really excited about how Zach died.
She's perched up on the couch the whole time.
He just didn't know why all the lies, like what is going on.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, LaRue was giving the lone wolf a rundown on the appointment murders. So according to LaRue, the group would set up an appointment with the victim, then lure them from the original appointment location, like, the hospital,
Yeah.
to his mom Miranda's apartment at the Cossana Flats next door. Then Miranda would hold the victim at gunpoint and get the PIN number for their ATM cards. The kids would withdraw the money, and then LaRue would come back and strangle the victim in Miranda's apartment. And then they would move the bodies to the trunks of the victims' cars.
Yeah.
LaRue told Boyesen they could find firearms in his mom's apartment at the Cossana Flats. And they totally did.
Yeah.
They found tons of unlicensed guns in the walls.
In the walls?
Yeah. And there were also blood stains all over the carpet. So they were kind of cleaned up, but they pulled the carpet up and the padding in the floor was just soaked with blood.
But so far at this point, none of these murders or crimes have been gun related, right?
Well, apparently the blood ended up being to appointment murder victim Anthony Schofield. So I don't know exactly why. But there must have been maybe something in addition to strangling, but it did belong to one of the appointment murder victims.
Yeah.
So now Miranda was firmly linked to the appointment murders with physical evidence. Now that they had Miranda's MO, Ben Boyesen did some digging and found Miranda linked to another unsolved murder in early 2016. So on January 27th, 2016, about 2 months after the Myers murders and 4 months before the appointment murders, there was a similar unsolved murder in Randfontein, which is a nearby area. Glenn McGregor was found fully clothed in his bathtub, dead, strangled and shot twice. So when revisiting the case, investigators found a large bank transfer made at the time of his death from his bank account to Miranda's account with the title, quote, "Excellent fuck."
Classy.
I was like, they didn't notice that?
All right.
So they're starting to get a lot of dirt on Miranda. Now we're seeing Miranda as like accidentally at the scene of the crime at the Myers murders, right? So we're starting to look back at all of these unsolved crimes in the area that have very similar patterns.
Sure.
Right? So Ben Boyesen takes a deeper look into the investigation in 2015 in the Myers murders, right? So at the time of the murders in 2015, Miranda and Marcel were on the radar for police along with Zach. A few months after the murder, a private investigator had found CCTV footage, not the private security footage, but additional security footage of the three of them driving away from the Myers house on the night of the murder.
Yeah.
So they can put them all in the same car.
Yeah.
And at the time, police interviewed Zach and Miranda, and they told police that, yes, they had been to the Myers house the day of the murders, but there were other people there as well. A man and a woman they didn't know. And according to Zach and Miranda, the mystery couple got into a big argument with the Myers, and Zach and Miranda got uncomfortable and just ended up leaving. So that's what they told investigators in 2015.
Why did they say they were there to begin with? What was the reason for going over there?
Honestly, they don't say. I like the documentary.
Yeah.
So the next day, Zach and Miranda heard the Myers had been murdered that night, but they didn't go to police for some reason or another. Not really clear. So police are looking at this couple. They think the story's a little strange. And so they ask Zach and Miranda to take a polygraph test. But Zach died a day before the polygraph test.
In the fiery crash.
Yeah.
Quote unquote.
However, investigators were about to get another big old break because insurance guy Shane Chatzklowitz did a blood typing analysis on the corpse, and surprise, the corpse wasn't Zach.
Oh, okay. Who was it?
We don't know.
Oh, so that's an unsolved thing?
As soon as Zach was supposed to take the polygraph, Zach, quote unquote, died. So now they have a body. They have no idea who that is.
Yeah.
And they have no idea where Zach is.
This insurance dude is a sick detective.
I know. I was like, I want this job. It's awesome.
Yeah, right.
So, of course, he's telling police. He's doing that kind of stuff. So where the heck is Zach, right?
Yeah,
Zach's gone. Well, actually, Zach was posing as a homeless dude on the streets of Krugersdorp. And he didn't really have much of a plan beyond that. He basically set up his murder and then went off into the streets. And he was just living there for months.
Yeah, yeah.
In Krugersdorp. Which I was like, what?
I guess he's just hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. So police now know that body's not Zach, and they're looking for Zach, searching for him at this point. But they don't really have any leads, and Zach was pretty much getting away with it and making new friends. And one of his new buddies told him about this really nice church lady who takes homeless dudes on these super fun camping trips like once a month. So Zach decides, I deserve a treat. I've had a rough year. I'm going on one of these trips.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that a Krugersdorp cop's girlfriend worked for this ministry group that took these guys out on these camping trips. So one day she's at home and she's hanging out with her cop boyfriend. And he was going over some photos of the person they were looking for, Zach Valentine.
Yeah.
She looks at the photos and she says, man, that guy looks like this dude, Michael Del Villiers, I've been hanging out with.
We were eating s'mores around the campfire last weekend.
Yeah, and the boyfriend's like, no way, dude. This is Zach Valentine. He's like a satanic high priest or something, right?
Yeah.
But he goes, just keep an eye out. He's got tattoos all over his back of lions and Latin and stuff like that. So the next trip, they all go swimming. And Zach Valentine takes off his shirt, and there's a big old Electus per Deus on his lower back.
Oh, really? You got the tramp stamp?
Yeah, right on his back. Electus per Deus.
Nice.
You gotta think, right? He knows they're looking for him.
Yeah.
He's gotta know. And he's got this tattoo on his back. I just feel like that's not a very smart idea.
Yeah,
you
all
can
of
swim
this,
with a shirt on.
All of this seems very dumb.
So the girlfriend sees this Electus per Deus tattoo. It's like, oh, that's the guy, right? With the lions and everything. So she tells her man, and police stormed in and arrested Zach at the camp for fraud on June 26th, 2016. So he's been on the run for like 6 months.
Yeah, and they busted the camping trip.
Yeah. So around this time, the dominoes start falling. A man named John Bernard enters a police station, and he was a drug addict who had worked with the group, basically somebody who's down and out who the group kind of took in. Mm-hmm. And he assisted LaRue with moving bodies and also helped with faking Zach's death. Mm-hmm. So this guy, John Bernard, confesses everything to investigators. So he and LaRue could both sign plea bargains.
Sure.
Which meant in exchange for a 25-year sentence, LaRue would now have to testify against his sister and his mother.
Right. Boy, I guess that's the devil's bargain. I guess you play with fire, you get burned.
So we're at this point. Mirinda, Zach, Marcel, and Cecilia were all in police custody for various charges. And they're all the same key players from the 2012 satanic murders. But the case against Cecilia is difficult to prosecute because she never left her spot in Cossana Flats. And there was no physical evidence connecting her to the murders. So prosecutor Garrett Roberts, with the help of lone wolf Ben Boyson, constructed a racketeering case against Cecilia. So instead of prosecuting this as like a religious cult or, individual murder cases or anything like that, they prosecute a racketeering case against the Electus per Deus group, naming Cecilia as the ringleader or mob boss.
Sure.
It turns out the money Cecilia collected for her fake orphanage helped the case fit the criteria for racketeering. And so even though the evidence was too thin to bring a murder charge against Cecilia, racketeering charges were actually easier to prove, and they had enough evidence to charge Cecilia with masterminding all of the murders.
Man, I just as a kid that grew up idolizing X-Men and Professor X's School for the Gifted, this woodsy orphanage of, the witches' children hanging out, that sounds awesome. I like
Somebody write a book.
That sounds like the coolest place to grow up ever.
That,
it just sounds like, oh man, they probably have so much fun in the tree houses they build or whatever.
All right. So after the charges were filed, Mirinda pleads guilty.
Yeah.
But she refuses to be a witness against Cecilia. So instead of getting a plea bargain, she got 11 life sentences for the murder charges and racketeering, and 115 years for charges including like robbery, fraud, possession of a firearm, like all these different things, right?
Good. I think I'm going to go ahead and say good.
So now we have John, LaRue, and Mirinda convicted in jail.
Yeah.
Marcel, Zach, and Cecilia were held without bail for 2 years until their trial in 2018. It was the state versus Zach, Marcel, and Cecilia, with Judge Elam Jacob Francis presiding, and the court was packed, right? Trial of the year.
You know, we've done all these different episodes. Some of them take place, you know, hundreds of years ago, and this is obviously very current. And the people always show up. When that gavel comes out, when there's a judge involved, everyone wants to gather around and see what happens.
I feel like it's also a medium call out of me always going, the court was packed. I probably said that 23 times, yeah, right. But I don't care. I do what I do. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was clear from the start that Miranda and Cecilia were working together to undermine LaRue's testimony. Mm-hmm. And their strategy was just to deny everything. So Miranda gets up there and she's basically working for the defense. So she throws her son under the bus and testified for Cecilia, you know. Mm-hmm. Miranda said Cecilia was her best friend and Marcel and Cecilia had nothing to do with the murder. She said she did everything along with Zach and LaRue without Cecilia's knowledge at all. And that also, Miranda loved killing people. She said it was a rush.
Yeah.
I love doing it.
Yeah.
In Cecilia's testimony, Cecilia walked up to testify with a gothic Guy Fieri spiked haircut, a black suit with these wide lapels and like this hot topic-y chunky beaded choker and this super half-lidded bored attitude. Like this chick is sarcastic,
can be bothered,
can't be bothered.
How old is she?
I'm not sure. I think at this point she's around 50.
So she's way too old to be acting like this.
No way. There's no age limit on like being badass cop. She's just doing her life. You leave her alone. Okay. She's doing her thing.
Okay.
So
all right.
This is what she had to say.
Yeah.
She never had a ministry called Electus Per Deus or had her followers tattooed. She's never heard of any orphanage and she has no idea why anyone gave her money. They were like, there's so much money. And she says, I don't know. I'm not going to tell them not to give me money, right?
Yeah, they're like, will you just sit back in your chair, please? She's like crawling on the side of the wall.
So the only thing she did admit to was having DID. I think it's dissociative identity disorder. That's like what we know as multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
So like the 2000
right
personalities in her body.
Yeah.
She said she got them from being abused as a child, but she can't remember anything about it or talk about it because she got hypnotized by a therapist. So the hypnosis made it so she can't talk about it.
Did they have any doctors or anyone take the stand and
not in the documentary? I don't know if they did or not. I mean, they did talk a little bit about how DID is like incredibly rare. It's so rare that most people have never seen anyone with DID.
Right.
So I don't know if I think that the idea is like she's not verified as having DID or diagnosed, but she said she was at one point. You can't talk to my therapist and I was hypnotized, so I can't tell you anything about it. Right?
Yeah. Got it.
And then Zach, for his part, also denied everything. So that was kind of their strategy, is just, I didn't know. You know?
Yeah, man. And his girlfriend got murdered and everything, and he's just completely on board with it.
Well, we'll talk about that. But after watching Cecilia deny everything at trial and her mother lie and throw her brother under the bus, 18-year-old Marcel outed the whole whack-ass cult.
Oh, good. Nice.
So up until this point, Marcel had remained silent, and she refused to cooperate at all with investigators or the prosecutor, right? Mm-hmm. And you remember back in the day, like even when the police were investigating initially, she was swearing at them. She would not work with them.
Yeah.
To the surprise of everyone, she took the stand right before judgment and spilled the beans about the whole operation.
Drama. That's how you do it. That's a teenager. You want to act like dramatic or narcissistic or whatever. Leave it to an actual teenager to deliver the goods, man.
She corroborated everything LaRue had said. And after she did this whole testimony, she said to the judge, I can't go back to the same jail or my mother will kill me.
Yeah.
And the judge looked at her mom, looked at crazy ass Cecilia, and was like, I got you, girl, and moved her to a different judge.
Yeah.
So in a different jail.
Yeah.
So here's what happened.
Okay.
Based on all the evidence and testimonies from the trial.
Great.
Okay?
Yes.
The satanic murders started with Natasha Berger. Natasha was very close to Rhea, right? And she worked with her on both the Know Your Enemy and the Know Your Savior courses. So after Rhea and Cecilia had their falling out, Rhea continued her original ministry, Overcomers Through Christ, right? One day, Natasha wrote a prayer to be read out loud during one of Rhea's Bible study sessions. And it was called the Dangerous Prayer. And it was basically about the Satanist children in Cecilia's fake orphanage. And from what I can tell, they still all thought the orphanage was real and these Satanist children exist. So I think it was not like a she's fake prayer.
Right.
It was a prayer about these children.
Yeah.
Or for these children.
Yeah.
After she found out about the prayer, Cecilia told her followers that because Natasha said that prayer specifically, 170 orphans died that night. So Cecilia got her followers to murder Natasha to stamp out evil in the world.
Oh my God. And then what happened with the neighbor?
So Miranda, 14-year-old Marcel, Zach, and his wife Michaela drove to Natasha's apartment in Pretoria. Marcel knocked on Natasha's front door, and she was actually armed with pepper spray to neutralize her so Zach and her mom could easily murder her.
Yeah.
But Natasha looked through the peephole, and she wouldn't open the door. She's suspicious. The whole thing looked weird. So the group left. Now, there's a little old lady named Joy Bunzair who lived next door who Natasha trusted.
Yeah.
So the new plan was to use Joy to get to Natasha. Now, Michaela had been acting a bit squirrely. So Michaela, under the orders of Cecilia, was supposed to kill Joy to prove her loyalty, while Zach murdered Natasha. So on July 26, 2012, the Valentines knock on Joy's door to tell her they were friends of Natasha's and they were there to surprise her for her birthday. So Joy invited them inside to wait for Natasha to get home from work. And then Zach forced her to write Natasha a letter to lure Natasha to Joy's unit when she got home from work. And then he grabbed Joy and killed her in a back bedroom.
Ugh, motherfucker.
So the pair planted the letter and waited for Natasha to arrive. And when she got to the house, Zach stabbed her as well. So the pair planted the letter on Natasha's door and then sat at Joy's house waiting for her to arrive.
Yeah.
So when Natasha entered the house, she sees Zach and Michaela and she starts fighting Zach. She's actually trained in karate, but Zach is armed. He has a knife and he stabs her to death. Ugh. And Natasha is found still holding the note that Joy had wrote her.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
After witnessing these murders and not participating, Michaela just freaks and she runs out of the apartment terrified. That's actually something that's verified by witnesses. And she runs out and she just gets in the car and stays in the car, basically failing her loyalty test.
Yeah.
So in August 2012, Cecilia told Electus Perdeus that Pastor Reginald Bendixson was responsible for leading Rhea astray and he needed to be killed.
Yeah.
So because of the double murder, Zach was now Cecilia's favorite in the group, and Miranda wanted to get back in the top spot. So she volunteered to murder Reg. And she felt really grateful at the time for the opportunity to teach 14-year-old Marcel how to kill for what she felt was like killing for Christ, right?
Damn.
So first, Cecilia sends Rhea a text saying, "Hi, Rhea. Have you said goodbye to Reg? I hope you have." And then she sends Zach, Miranda, and Marcel to Reg Bendixson's house armed with an axe and a knife. So the three of them dressed up like fake cops and pretended to be investigating Joy and Natasha's murders. Zach hit him from behind with an axe. Then Miranda stabbed him. And they basically went berserk on Reg. They created this horrific crime scene. So it was just like, and I think it was in the middle of the day.
And the little girl is just watching these murders?
So she's around watching. She's witnessed everything, right?
But not really participating exactly.
Her mother's trying to get her to participate,
Yeah.
and she's willingly. She says at one point, like, having a child around to lure people out of homes was part of Cecilia's plan for keeping her in the loop with all this stuff.
Right.
So by October, Cecilia was convinced that Michaela was no longer trustworthy. And with police closing in, she decided to order the group to kill Michaela for the preservation of the group. So the day Michaela was murdered, Zach put sleep medication in her coffee and left for work. Then Miranda and Marcel entered the home, and Miranda stabbed Michaela over 60 times. At one point, she tried to get Marcel to participate, but Marcel just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And then they left. So to complete his alibi, Zach had arranged for a real estate agent to come to tour the house that afternoon. So he came to the house just after the real estate agent arrived. He kind of timed it that way.
Yeah.
And then they both got out of their cars and walked into the home together. And he actually told the real estate agent to start in the bedrooms. Look at the bedrooms first, and we'll go through the house. So the real estate agent was actually the first person to see the body and also be able to be a witness saying Zach wasn't there.
Wow.
Right? So in November 2015, at this point, the satanic murders are wrapped, right?
Yeah.
But the group is running out of money. So the group was able at this point to rope in John Bernard,
The homeless guy, to help do stuff.
Yes.
Right.
So thinking the money was for the Satan orphanage, Bernard agreed to help Cecilia and her gang murder his wealthy boss and wife for some quick cash. And that's how Marcel, Miranda, and Zach were able to murder Peter and Joan Meyer. He set up that whole thing.
Damn.
So after being questioned about the Meyer murders by police, Zach freaks. And Cecilia decides to have the group fake Zach's death by murdering a local homeless man, Jared Jackson, and using his body. So LaRue, John, Zach, and Cecilia make a plan to fake Zach's death to get Cecilia and the orphanage a fat insurance payout, right? Two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
On December 16th, 2015, Jared Jackson went on a drive with LaRue and John. LaRue drugged and strangled him, and then the two lit the car on fire with his body inside. Afterwards, Miranda showed up and pretended to be Zach's sister, identifying the body as Zach's to police. So on January, this is just everything that happened.
Right.
Then in January, on Cecilia's command, Miranda took Marcel and LaRue along with John Bernard to the home of Glenn McGregor for what was actually the first of the 4 appointment murders. So Miranda forced him to transfer money into her account, shot him twice, and then forced LaRue to strangle him at gunpoint. So she held LaRue at gunpoint. And Ben Boyson said during their interviews that LaRue was like, my mom was incredibly abusive towards me.
Yeah.
She used to hit him and do lots of things to him. So at that point, he said she held him by gunpoint. In the same fashion, basically, the group systematically murdered Anthony Schofield, Kevin McAlpine, and Hanley Laitkin for money for all the appointment murders.
Man.
At the conclusion of the trial,
Yeah.
Judge L.M. Jacob Francis said, quote, "This is the worst case I've presided over."
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, it's so many murdered people.
Yeah. It's crazy, the scope of the whole thing. So on June 3rd, 2019, all were found guilty.
Yeah.
Zach was sentenced to 8 life sentences plus 93 years. Cecilia was sentenced to 13 life sentences and 155 years. Marcel was sentenced to 7 life sentences and 144 years. And under their plea bargains, John got 20 years and LaRue got 25.
So this lady was a straight up cult leader. Like, that's more deaths than the Manson family.
Yeah. Cecilia was the head of the group. So because of these racketeering charges, she was charged with every count the group committed. So she was charged for everything.
Yeah.
And at this point, Rhea now lives with a new identity and has no contact with her family. And the group was charged with 11 murders, but there are connections to other murders as well. Allegedly, Cecilia gave that samurai schoolboy spiritual counseling before the murder.
Man.
So they say that there's a connection. I think that that's not proven.
Yeah.
And there was actually a boy who lived near Cecilia in the Cossana Flats named Lawrence Swartz. And he died violently around the same time of the satanic murders in 2012.
Yeah.
And his family believes he was murdered and then posed as if he had committed suicide. And they have a lot of evidence to support that. And money was taken from his bank account immediately after his death.
So what was she doing with all this money?
It's just keeping it, spending it. Who knows?
Just like paying her internet bill. She wasn't like.
It was a lot of money. I mean, she might have just been like kicking it really hard. I think they had parties and stuff, but I can't imagine. I don't know what she was doing.
And were her parents into Satanism? Is she on some lineage? Like, what is her background?
I don't know. But what I do know is that what they dropped at the end of the documentary is in that apartment, she had 2 small kids and she was married to a cop. So
at the end, so we need to do a whole other documentary series. We need to get this girl a grant and figure out this whole lady's life story.
Like beforehand, I know it's pretty wild. Like their family was there the entire, like during the high nights, like all that stuff. So I do want to leave you with this one thing. There's actually a currently ongoing investigation into the police conduct during the satanic murders. And they're dealing with Cecilia. So first off, like I said, Cecilia's husband is a low-ranking cop in the Krugersdorp ranks. There's nothing more than that, no information more than that we have, but it does seem a little suspicious.
Right, all those files ended up missing.
Right. Also, in 2012, when Captain Van Dyke was heading the investigation, he found a bunch of cops basically hanging out with Cecilia and the group at her apartment around the time of the satanic murders. And when he confronted them, they said, "Oh, we're working deep undercover." But when he looked into that claim, he found that they had no clearance or paperwork to be working undercover on the case.
So usually when you watch one of these things and then the cult leader, you're like, wow, they're really charismatic or they've really got something, you know? And then you didn't pick up on any sort of charismatic like thing with her. Are
you talking about me?
You said you watch all these videotapes of her and then the people are interviewing her.
Oh, she's charismatic? No, I mean, it's like, that's what I was saying is I think for some people, they look at her charisma and they think she's full of crap. Yeah. And then for other people, they think she's a witch. I mean, it just depends on what your perception is. But she's making a lot of strong, big claims.
Well, and she can vomit out blood on command, apparently.
Well, basically, what she was doing was she was filling up latex gloves with blood and hiding them in her sleeves and then popping them in her mouth and like busting them. Yeah. With like, so all the blood could then come out of her mouth.
Does she still have followers? Were any of these people
Hold
in
on,
this
let me
documentary?
finish. Jesus Christ.
All right. Hurry up. Let's go. Yeah. I have a lot of questions. All right, keep going.
So after all of these cops were caught hanging out with Cecilia without any clearance for being undercover, Captain Van Dyke was more forward about questioning police conduct at the time, right? So he was a little bit of a bee in the bonnet in terms of that. Right. And then the other thing he was again saying like, you guys are too hyper focused on the occult aspect and possibly misinterpreting evidence. And after he was known to be saying those types of things, he was removed from the case. And then that's when the investigation went cold, right? Yeah. So they're looking into why he was removed. That's part of the investigation. Right. And finally, there was a man in this documentary. He's referred to as Mr. X. He's now living under a new identity. But shortly after the satanic murders, before the appointment murders, he actually infiltrated the cult and ended up wearing a wire. So he went to an Electus per Deus meeting. He got a lot closer to Cecilia, and he got them to tell them about the murders from top to bottom in their own words. Who did what, why they did it, how they did it, and everything. He wore this wire.
On behalf of who?
A colonel, like a high-ranking colonel in the Krugersdorp police force.
Yeah.
So essentially, he was a part of the group Electus per Deus in this sort of satellite way. Yeah. And after Michaela's death, he thought something was wrong. So he kind of believed it. But then after Michaela died, he thought that something was up. So he traveled to Krugersdorp to hang out with the group and see if he could find anything out. And when he started finding little bits and pieces about the murders out, he went and started talking to his friend, and his friend said, I know a high-ranking colonel that can help you in the police department. So they set up a meeting, and he told him everything he knew, and the colonel said, okay, I need you to wear this wire, and I'm going to stay outside and basically have your back. So if anything goes south, I'll jump in and get you. So he wore a wire, And he went to this meeting and everybody told him basically everything that happened. But while they're saying everything, he realizes that Zach had left. So as soon as he realizes Zach had left, he thinks he's in danger. So the dude bounced and he went downstairs and he tried to get on his motorcycle to escape. And on the back of his motorcycle, he found a tracking device. So he jumped in the bushes and he's looking around and the colonel is gone. Like the guy who said he was monitoring the whole situation is totally gone.
Yeah.
And as he's in the bushes, Zach pulls up with like 2 cars full of people, obviously looking for him.
Yeah.
So he manages to escape and he's pissed about this colonel, but somehow he gets convinced to give the colonel the tape. He says, well, I got the tape and it works. And that tape basically went into the hands of this colonel. And then when it came back, it was essentially destroyed.
Yeah.
So they tried to play it at the trial and you couldn't hear anything. But there were like 4 witnesses that testified to hearing the tape with Mr. X. And it was crystal clear before he handed it to the colonel.
Whoa.
So now all of that stuff is being investigated now.
Damn, man. I want to know about Cecilia's childhood and her parents. I really want to know if she was a 42nd generation witch.
It's already been 2 hours. We're done.
Thank you so much for listening to Muriel's Murders, and a very special thank you goes out to Linda for recommending this case. Shout out to all of our South African listeners. It's so amazing when you guys hit us up from across this incredible globe of ours. It's just so meaningful. Muriel watched the documentary. She did all the research. She wrote the whole thing up. She's on fire. I did all the editing, post-production, that kind of good stuff, and it was recorded right here in our living room.
To help support the podcast and to unlock exclusive episodes, this month we did the Heaven's Gate cult, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, and kind of, connected to this in a certain way.
Yeah. So it's very fun. Hang out with us there. You can sign up for our Patreon at www.patreon.com/Muriel's Murders.
We also draw and animate little bonus content cartoons for Muriel's Murders, which those beautiful pieces of art populate our social media feeds. You can find us at Muriel's Murders on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Our DMs are open, and you can email us at murielsmurders@gmail.com.
Please rate and review Muriel's Murders on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us grow. And if you're listening on Spotify, please add this episode to a playlist of podcasts you think your friends would tune into. We'll trick the robot algorithms.
Thank you to Mario Casalini. He does our music. Find him on Instagram at Casalini Beats.
Thank you to Ryan and Ryan at Campfire Media.
And if you want more Nick and Muriel, please check out our non-murder podcast, Hell in Your 30s, wherever you get your podcasts.
That's it.
Bye.